Another month, another divisive episode of Helluva Boss. I love it here. Honestly, the response to Unhappy Camper surprised me at first, because when I watched it, I really liked it. It felt like the Helluva Boss I signed up for. Aside from the episode looking gorgeous as always, I was already sold on it just by the premise being centered around a job on Earth, because it feels like a rarity for the show nowadays. And I loved that everybody had something to do. Millie and Moxxie were the stars of the episode, getting swept up in the antics of a summer camp that felt like it was right out of the CW. Blitz was on the hunt for his sister, and Luna, yeah! I loved Millie and Moxxie's disguises. I thought the songs were pretty fun, especially the one with Millie's epic banjo solo and the captions taunting Moxxie. I think that's one of my favorite gags in the series so far. And even with the episode focused on Eminem, it felt like Blitz's B story still added to the bigger picture by giving us a proper introduction to Barb, thus giving us some more insight into Blitz's troubled past. Is she single? Just asking for a friend. I was happy with the episode from all of this alone, even if I did find Moxxie annoying, which sucks to say because he's my favorite character. But when diehard fans aren't happy with this episode, something's wrong. Looking at all the criticisms towards this episode, most of them centered on Moxxie, I gotta admit that Unhappy Campers feels like a case of good concept, bad execution. More so, it feels like something's missing. Something that would make watching Moxxie's toxic behavior a little more bearable. Because as it stands, Moxxie's just tired of taking L's. And not only pouts over Millie cracking the case, but he goes overboard trying to make everyone like him and gets salty when Millie has an easier time making friends. And while I get that could be upsetting, I don't get why he would lash out at her. It's not like she was trying to flex how easy it was for her to make friends or anything. In fact, she tries to help Moxxie out, and she ends up getting chewed out for it. Moxxie's being a straight up hypocrite when he yells at Millie for getting caught up in the social aspect of the mission, when he did just as quickly. The reality is, he's just salty she's getting all the attention and acceptance. And the thing is, it would have worked if Moxxie's motivation was something deeper than Blitz's approval and thus his own self-esteem. Like, I'm all for characters being flawed. I think people are too hard on characters nowadays for showing any kind of flaw. But I would have enjoyed this episode way more if Moxxie was caught up in solving the case and didn't want to take a moment to stop and smell the roses. Whereas you could still have Millie getting too caught up in mingling and all the attention she's getting as Millard, because as she says herself, she finally feels like she's important for once in her life. What if that one queeby archetype who was tearing into Moxxie gets rejected by Millard, as Millie would obviously have no interest in dating any of these campers? So the chick starts messing up Millard's reputation, creating a scenario where Moxxie has no one covering his blind spots for a case that's really important to him, while Millie has no support from her husband while she's going through a hard time. We still get a Millie and Moxxie episode, and Millie still gets her development, but we forego all the cringy Moxxie moments that makes him a lot less likable. But what could we change about the case that would have Moxxie so fixated on it and explain his irrational behavior a bit better? Well, that takes me to one of two big changes that I think would have done wonders for this episode. And that is Moxxie's mom. So the former camp counselor who comes to him for help states that they died by drowning, and they believe another counselor was responsible. Now, in an episode where Moxxie gets to lead the case for the very first time, this was a golden opportunity to flesh out his character by tying the case to his dead mama drama. 2 episodes earlier this season in X's and O's, we're introduced to Moxxie's father Crimson, and we learn of his late mother, who currently doesn't have a name. From what we can infer, it seems like Moxxie's mother cared for him deeply, but was trapped in an abusive relationship with Crimson. And although she left Crimson, he got the last laugh, as one of her heels can be spotted in the water of his dumping grounds right there. So, more likely than not, he drowned her. Since this detail wasn't really thrown in our faces, it's up in the air if Moxxie himself even knows that Crimson had his mom killed. But that's where I think that ambiguity could have factored into the episode. Instead of having Moxxie try to sway Blitz into taking the case, which leads to Blitz assigning Moxxie as leader solely because he doesn't want to deal with it, he just wants to find his sister, why not show that, for some reason, Moxxie has an immediate emotional connection to this case? And he enters Blitz's office in an emotionally charged state, adamant that they have to make an exception for this client, only to have a disinterested Blitz hand over the reins to Moxxie without much of a fight. I just prefer a hook that establishes Moxxie's acting a little off, while keeping the audience guessing as to what about this case is bothering him. It'd make his selfish and irrational behavior in this episode feel a little less out of left field, while also reminding us that this job can hit too close to home for everyone at Imp. So when Millie and Moxxie finally hit their limit with each other, feeling like they don't have each other's backs, Moxxie can not only apologize to Millie for not supporting her, but he can explain that this case is important to him because he suspects that his dad drowned his mom. Maybe he noticed something in X's and O's. Maybe he had this suspicion for a long time. Either way, it's been at the front of his mind the entire time here. He's been so determined to get to the bottom of the case through his own hard work, because even if he feels like he can't avenge his mom, he can at least avenge someone who suffered a similar fate. He let unresolved trauma get the better of himself and hurt his wife in the process. And once he gets called out on it, addresses it, and communicates his emotions in a healthy manner, he's able to take on the case with a clearer head. So even when things still blow up in everyone's faces, literally, at least we can still walk away with Moxxie having some kind of win by opening up to his wife and strengthening that relationship even more. Which would contrast the colossal L Blitz took even more, as Blitz ruined his sister's gig and pushed her further away than she already was. And then we'd be left with an open-ended mystery. Did Crimson drown his wife? Will Moxxie ever be able to stand up to him and call him out for it? I'm telling you, something along these lines would have sold way more people in this episode. And if these elements do end up coming back into play later down the road, I wonder if they'll retroactively try to make it seem like Moxxie was thinking about that in this episode. The other thing I feel like was sorely missing from this episode were the Dorks. Look, I get that it's a smaller plot thread in the grand scheme of the show that doesn't need to be followed up on every time they go to Earth, but I've never been a fan of things like that having no acknowledgement at all. Now sure, the next time we see Dorks, it could easily be another episode dedicated entirely to them that reveals they've been keeping tabs on all of Imp's trips to Earth throughout Season 2, just like they did in Season 1. Looking at the bigger picture, Imp is actually building a case against themselves between Blitz's TV appearance and Millard's social media fame, because now there's going to be multiple videos proving their existence. Videos where they're trying to blend in with society. And lest we forget, Agents 1 and 2 recovered footage of the massacre at their HQ, and all of these public appearances have ended in at least one murder. So if the right dots connected, things could get ugly for Imp pretty quickly. And if the show does end up going down this road, nice! But even then, I'd still wish that Dorks made their presence known somewhere in this episode. Imagine if Agents 1 and 2 played a role akin to Team Rocket, where they're still the only members left at Dorks, working with the resources they have left, and are hell-bent on capturing Imp after a video of Millard ends up on their For You page. Think of how utterly wacky they could get, pulling up on the gang with the goofiest low-budget contraptions possible. Yet, despite their goofiness, they still manage to be somewhat threatening just because of their determination and their potential connections to a larger, much scarier organization. Like, yeah, they're a joke now when the world thinks they pump out harebrained conspiracies, but the more Imp feeds into their antics and gives them documented evidence of actual demons, it won't be too long before the mere sight of them puts the viewer and Blitz, Moxxie, and Millie on the edge of their seat. I genuinely believe they would have added so much more tension to the episode. Think about it! They come out of the woodwork because Millie becomes a social media star, which only happens because Moxxie dragged out the mission. So Moxxie would face some major consequences for his actions throughout the episode, while having this also drive a bigger wedge between Blitz and Barbie. She was already pissed that Blitz inadvertently led to her pawn getting blasted by a bomb pop, leaving her out of a job. But imagine how much worse it would have been if, on top of all of that, the feds were brought onto the scene. Woo! She would have been more done with him than she already was. Now, as nice as all of this would have been, I do want to remind myself and everyone watching that this is still an indie production, which means budgets and limitations are very much a thing. So as crazy as it sounds on paper, I don't really know if all of that would have been feasible. I mean, we're lucky if Luna speaks every 3 episodes. To add another story element in this episode would be to demand more from the writers and artists who are already working their asses off to make the show the best they can be.
to all the writers, Vivzy and Brandon.
So, that just adds to my point. Vivzy's making 2 shows at once. I'm surprised she even had time to write on this one, but I'm not surprised she didn't throw another thing in there, just because a YouTuber said it was a good idea. I mean, I'm talking about this after the episode already came out, but you know what I mean. And again, the artist? Those hands have endured enough. This episode already had a pretty stacked cast as it is. Lots and lots of characters to draw. That being said, I would have settled for the Gravity Falls approach. You know, how the government agents were hidden all over 2A? Just give me one shot of Agents 1 and 2 poorly disguised as counselors in the background, with one of them recording Eminem on their phone, and I'd be happy. Not a huge speaking role or anything that would detract from the focus of the episode. I do think that this episode is getting a little too much flack, which is just kind of the norm when it comes to talking about Helluva Boss online, but there really is no denying that Moxxie was done dirty by being written as more of an a-hole like Blitz. We could say that was intentional, and argue that Moxxie was walking a mile in Blitz's shoes, but it didn't feel that way in execution, so I'm not gonna say that. Still, I thought this was a fun episode that, like a lot of Helluva Boss episodes, had some fun Saturday morning cartoon energy. Probably because these episodes usually drop on Saturday mornings in my time zone. Paired with a bright color palette, snappy sense of humor, and camp rock musical numbers, I just get the same feeling watching these for the first time that I had watching stuff like Kids WB growing up. It's a feeling I also got watching Owl House and Amphibia every week. But unlike those shows, Helluva Boss is unique in that it's an adult animated series, so the stories feel aimed at me the way they did when I was a kid. It's a special kind of feeling. I hope we live to see the day where more adult animated series drop new episodes on Saturday mornings for all the cartoon fans in their 20s to enjoy. Because nostalgia is one hell of a drug, and childhood traditions are one of the few things to help us escape the cruelty of this world, this goddamn forsaken world. Wait, was I saying something? But let me know what you guys thought about the episode and my little revisions in the comments down below. I might make more Helluva Boss videos because writing this one was a lot of fun, and I got a few theories running around my noggin for making this video. But the algorithm's been mean to me lately, so if this flops, I'm probably never talking about this show again.